Government. The Prime Minister.
Thank you. With permission, Mr. Speaker, I would like to make a statement on yesterday's European Council. But before I do, I am sure that the whole House will welcome the news this morning that the Metropolitan Police have arrested Julian Assange. Arrested for breach of bail after nearly 7 years in the Ecuadorian embassy. He has also been arrested in relation to an extradition request from the United States authorities. This is now a legal matter before the courts. My right honourable friend, the Home Secretary, will make a statement on this later, but I would like to thank the Metropolitan Police for carrying out their duties with great professionalism and to welcome the cooperation of the Ecuadorian government in bringing this matter to a resolution. Mr. Speaker, this goes to show that in the United Kingdom, no one is above the law. Turning to the Council, my priority is to deliver Brexit and to do so in an orderly way that does not disrupt people's lives. So I continue to believe we need to leave the European Union with a deal as soon as possible. And of course, this House has voted repeatedly to avoid a no deal. Yet despite the efforts of members on all sides, we have not so far been able to vote for a deal. So ahead of the Council, I wrote to President Tusk to seek a short extension to the Article 50 period to the 30th of June. Critically, I also requested that any extension should be terminable, so that whenever this House agrees a deal and ratifies the withdrawal agreement, we can get on and leave. And I did this not merely to avoid a further delay beyond ratification of the withdrawal agreement, but specifically to retain our ability to leave the EU without having to hold European parliamentary elections on the 23rd of May. Mr. Speaker, the discussions at the Council were difficult and, unsurprisingly, many of our European partners share the deep frustration that I know so many of us feel in this House over the current impasse. There was a range of views about the length of an extension, with a large number of member states preferring a longer extension to the end of this year or even into the next. In the end, what was agreed by the UK and the EU27 was a compromise, an extension lasting until the end of October. The Council also agreed that we would update on our progress at the next meeting in June. Critically, as I requested, the Council agreed that this extension can be terminated when the withdrawal agreement has been ratified. So, for example, if we were to pass a deal by the 22nd of May, we would not have to take part in European elections, and when the EU has also ratified, we will be able to leave at 11 p.m. on the 31st of May. In short, the date of our departure from the EU and our participation in the European parliamentary elections remains a decision for this House. As President Tusk said last night, during this time, the course of action will be entirely in the UK's hands. In agreeing this extension, there was some discussion in the Council about whether stringent conditions should be imposed on the UK for its EU membership during this period, but I argued against this. I put the case that there is only a single tier of EU membership with no conditionality attached beyond existing treaty obligations. The Council conclusions are clear that during the course of the extension, the UK will continue to hold full membership rights. In turn, I assured my fellow leaders that the UK will continue to be bound by all our ongoing obligations as a member state, including the duty of sincere cooperation. The United Kingdom plays a responsible and constructive role on the world stage, and we always will. That is the kind of country we are. The choices we face are stark, and the timetable is clear. I believe we must now press on at pace with our efforts to reach a consensus on a deal that is in the national interest. I welcome the discussions that have taken place with the opposition in recent days and the further talks which are resuming today. This is not the normal way of British politics, and it is uncomfortable for many in both the government and opposition parties. Reaching an agreement will not be easy, because to be successful, it will require both sides to make compromises. But however challenging it may be politically, I profoundly believe that in this unique situation, where the House is deadlocked, it is incumbent on both front benches to seek to work together to deliver what the British people voted for. And I think that the British people expect their politicians to do just that when the national interest demands it. I hope that we can reach an agreement on a single unified approach that we can put to the House for approval. But if we cannot do so soon, then we will seek to agree a small number of options for the future relationship that we will put to the House in a series of votes to determine which course to pursue. And as I have made clear before, the Government stands ready to abide by the decision of the House, but to make this process work, the opposition would need to agree to this too. With the House's consent, we could also bring forward the Withdrawal Agreement Bill, which is a necessary element of any deal, whichever course we take. This bill will take time to pass through both houses, so if we want to get on with leaving, we need to start this process soon. And it could also provide a useful forum to resolve some of the outstanding issues in the future relationship. Crucially, Mr. Speaker, any agreement on the future relationship may involve a number of additions and clarifications to the political declaration. So I'm pleased that at this Council all 27 Member States responded to my update on the ongoing cross-party talks by agreeing that the European Council is prepared to reconsider the political declaration on the future relationship in accordance with the positions and principles stated in its guidelines and statements. The Council also reiterated that the withdrawal agreement itself could not be reopened. Mr. Speaker, I know the whole country is intensely frustrated that this process to leave the European Union has not still been completed. I never wanted to seek this extension, and I deeply regret that we have not yet been able to secure agreement in this House for a deal that would allow us to leave in a smooth and orderly way. I know too that this whole debate is putting members on all sides of the House under immense pressure and causing uncertainty across the country, and we need to resolve this. So let's use the opportunity of the recess to reflect on the decisions that will have to be made swiftly on our return after Easter, and let us then resolve to find a way through this impasse, so that we can leave the European Union with a deal as soon as possible, so that we can avoid having to hold those European parliamentary elections, and above all, so that we can fulfil the democratic decision of the referendum, deliver Brexit and move our country forward. This is our national duty as elected members of this House, and nothing today is more pressing or more vital, and I commend this statement to the House.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would like to thank the Prime Minister for an advance copy of her statement. Mr. Speaker, yesterday EU leaders agreed to grant the United Kingdom an Article 50 extension to the 31st of October. This means that Britain will now have to start the process of holding European elections in the extraordinary situation of not knowing whether new MEPs will take their seats or for how long. This has come just 3 weeks after the Prime Minister told the House she was not prepared to delay Brexit any longer than the 30th of June. The second extension in the space of a fortnight represents not only a diplomatic failure, but is another milestone in the government's mishandling of the entire Brexit process. A measure of this could be seen in this House on Monday, when 1/3 of her party voted against her own policy to request a short delay and 4 of her cabinet members abstained. And can the Prime Minister also confirm that the request by the Leader of the House on Tuesday for the EU to reopen the withdrawal agreement has also been rebuffed? The Prime Minister stuck rigidly to a flawed plan, and now the clock has run down, leaving Britain in limbo and adding to the deep uncertainty of business, workers and people all across this country. Mr. Speaker, I welcome that the Prime Minister finally decided to reach out to the opposition last week and open talks to try and find a breakthrough. The fact that the invitation didn't even come at the 11th hour, but at 5 past midnight, 3 days after the Prime Minister had missed her own Brexit deadline of the 29th of March, is a reflection of the government's fundamental error in not proceeding by consensus. However, Mr. Speaker, I can report to the House that the talks now taking place between the opposition and the government are serious, detailed and ongoing, and I welcome the constructive engagement that we've had. Although this view may not be universally shared by many on the Conservative benches, I also welcome the indications from the government they may be willing to move in the key areas that have prevented the Prime Minister's deal from being supported on this side of the House. If these talks are to be a success, resulting in an agreement that will bring our country back together, the government will have to compromise. That is why it is with disappointment that I read the Secretary of State for International Trade's letter this week, in what seemed to be an attempt to scupper meaningful talks by all but ruling out Labour's customs union proposals. A proposal, I might add, which is supported by business and industry bodies as well as by all leading trade unions in this country. It is a proposal that European Union leaders and the Irish Taoiseach just yesterday have said is both credible and negotiable. Labour will continue to engage constructively in talks because we respect the result of the referendum and we are committed to defending jobs, industry and living standards by delivering a close economic relationship with the European Union and securing frictionless trade with improved rights and standards. If that is not possible, we believe all options should remain on the table, including the option of a public vote. And, Mr. Speaker, we see no advantage in the proposals of the Secretary of State for International Trade to create distance and divergence in our trading relationship with our largest trading partner. This House must also bear in mind that after a deal has passed, the current Prime Minister has said she will step down. We have no idea who may succeed her. So with that in mind, we have to entrench any agreement, because some of those already throwing their hats into the ring have said they would scrap the Human Rights Act, they would rip up burdensome regulation, or would even prefer to leave without any deal at all. Some on the Conservative benches want nothing more than to use Brexit to create a race to the bottom, opening up our economy to US big pharma companies in our National Health Service, hormone-treated beef on our plates, slash workers' rights and consumer standards, and to have the UK become a virtual tax haven on the shores of Europe. Let me be clear to the Prime Minister and to the country, Labour will not support any deal that would leave us open to such a dystopian vision for the future of this country. It is incumbent on all of us now to find a way forward. We must continue to talk to each other, and if the government is serious, the red lines must move and we must see a real compromise. I look forward to the discussions in the coming days, and even at this late stage, to work to find a deal that can command not only the support of this House, but, perhaps more importantly, the support of the public across this country too.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And can I say to the Leader of the Opposition that the talks between the Government and the Opposition have indeed been serious. They are detailed and they are being taken forward in a constructive and positive fashion. We did, of course, offer talks at an earlier stage than very recently, but I'm pleased that we are now able to sit down in this way. He raised the issue about the European parliamentary elections. Of course, had members in this House voted with a majority to agree the withdrawal agreement on the 29th of March, we would have guaranteed leaving on the 22nd of May and not holding the European parliamentary elections. At the time, obviously, the Right Honourable Gentleman didn't feel able to support a deal to enable us not to hold those European parliamentary elections. It is still possible to do so, and we will continue to work on that. He talked about the need for us to protect jobs, industry and living standards, and indeed that is what we have been aiming to do with the deal that we agreed with the European Union. But not just in relation to the deal with the European Union. Actually, it is this government that has presided over record levels of people in employment. It is this government that has seen helping people with their living standards with tax cuts for 32 million people. He talked about the future relationship and the need to entrench aspects of the future relationship. Of course, the government did on the 29th of March say that we would accept the amendment that was put down on the order paper by the honourable member for Stoke-on-Trent Central, which would require Parliament to have that role in looking at the future relationship and the negotiating objectives for the future. And what that clearly makes the case is that any government, as it's going through those negotiations, will of course have to ensure that they are taking Parliament with them in agreeing that future relationship. And on the issue of coming together in an agreement, the point is very simple. I'm not prepared just to accept Labour's policies. The Labour Party isn't prepared just to accept our policies. As the honourable gentleman, the member for Holborn and St Pancras, has said, this takes compromise on both sides, and that's what we're doing, sitting down seriously to find a way that enables this House to ensure that there is a deal that commands a majority, so we can leave the European Union, fulfil the vote of the British people in 2016 in the referendum, and do so in a way that does indeed protect jobs and living standards and industry.
Mr Kenneth Clark.
May I urge my right honourable friend, the Prime Minister, to stick to her commitment to lead the country through to the conclusion of the Brexit process and to ignore some of the vicious attacks being made upon her by our more extreme right-wing colleagues. Can I also ask her, given that she rightly points out in the national interest that the next obvious step is to reach a settlement between the government and the principal opposition party on the best way forward, can she indicate that it is clear that the minimum that requires is some sort of customs arrangement and sufficient regulatory alignment, at least to keep our trade as open and free as it has been across the Channel and in the Republic of Ireland? And can she negotiate that so it does actually bind any successor government in future negotiations?
My right honourable and learned friend is right that, of course, as we look to that future relationship, we are looking at the customs arrangement that would be in place in that future relationship. We have already indicated, as is reflected, in fact, in the political declaration, that we want to retain the benefits of a customs union, of no tariffs, no quotas, no rules of origin checks, and that is provided for in the political declaration. Stands. Of course, what we do see is we haven't been able to enshrine that in legal text because it's not possible for the European Union to negotiate that treaty with us until we're a third country, until we're out of the European Union. So any commitments that are made here will be about the negotiating objectives that we take through into that process, but there will still be negotiations to be had with the European Union. But in terms of adding to and clarifying what is in that political declaration and the position of the UK government. Obviously, as I've indicated, the EU Council have said that they would be willing to look at additions and clarifications to that political declaration.
Ian Blackford.
Thank you, Mr Speaker, and can I thank the Prime Minister for advance sight of her statement. Mr Speaker, what a total fiasco the past few weeks, months and years have been under this shambolic Tory government. The UK did not leave the EU in March, and thankfully, given the efforts of SNP politicians and others in this place, and the goodwill of the European Union, we will not crash out of the EU on Friday. What an irony that it's the European Union that's got the UK out of this mess. Let that be a lesson for members in this place. It is the EU that has put the interest of our citizens in the UK first, our businesses, our farmers and our fishermen. We should not be lambasting the EU, we should be thanking them. With the European Union agreeing to a further extension to Article 50, the Prime Minister must use this time to hold a second EU referendum with the option of remaining on the ballot paper. It is now a very real possibility that we can remain in the European Union. Mr Speaker, there were a total of 133 days between the 1997 general election and the devolution referendum in Scotland. As of today, there are 204 days until the new Brexit deadline on the 31st of October. So will the Prime Minister now remove the ridiculous excuse that there isn't enough time to hold a second referendum with Remain on the ballot paper. Scotland did not vote for Brexit and should not be forced to accept any Brexit deal that will harm our interests. The only way forward is to put the decision back to the people. Scotland will not support a Brexit deal cooked up by the Brexit-supporting Labour and Tory parties. So, Mr Speaker, let me ask this. Prime Minister, yesterday you ducked and dived my questioning, so a simple yes or no will suffice. Has your government offered a second EU referendum in talks with the Labour Party? Yes or no? No. Has the Labour Party requested a second EU referendum in the talks? Yes or no? Is the Labour Party cozying up to the Tories, asking to end freedom of movement as a price for their support for a Tory deal? Yes or no? And finally, Mr Speaker, will the Prime Minister recognise that she cannot fix this mess alone? Stop ignoring the people of Scotland. Open up meaningful discussions with the devolved governments and with civic society. Start leading by listening, Prime Minister, and please get her head out of the sand.
To the right honourable gentleman, the government has not offered a second referendum. And our position, I said to him yesterday in PMQs that our position on that issue had not changed. A second referendum has been rejected twice by this House, but of course, when legislation goes through, once we've agreed a deal and legislation is going through for the bill that puts that in place, I'm sure there will be members of this House, because there are members who do support a second referendum, who will want to press their case during that legislation going through. I continue to believe, it's not an excuse, there isn't an issue of excuse about timing. I believe that it's important for us to deliver on the first referendum that took place in 2016 on the result of that. And can I just say to the right honourable gentleman, if he's so interested in referenda, the question is, will he now abide by the result of the 2014 Scottish referendum? Yes or no?
Sir William Cash.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Does my right honourable friend, the Prime Minister, appreciate the anger that her abject surrender last night has generated across the country, having broken 100 times promises 100 times not to extend the time? She knows what I'm saying, and she's done that. Does she also accept that this withdrawal agreement undermines our democracy, the constitutional status of Northern Ireland, our right to govern ourselves, control over our laws, and undermines our national interest? Will she resign?
Can I say to my honourable friend, first of all, I do not recognise the description of the withdrawal agreement that he has put before this House. I believe we have negotiated a good deal for the United Kingdom. He references the fact that I have, he's absolutely right, on many, many occasions in this House, and he and other members of my honourable friends have been keeping count. I had said that I wanted us to leave the European Union on the 29th of March, and indeed I did. I voted for the UK to leave the European Union on the 29th of March. I wanted us to set in train that guaranteed leaving on the 22nd of May. I voted to leave on the 22nd of May. Sadly, not sufficient number of members across this House voted to leave the European Union on those dates, and hence the extension has been requested to enable us to come to a position where this House can agree on a majority on a deal that we can then deliver on leaving the European Union.
Hilary Benn.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Can I thank the Prime Minister for putting the national interest above her party's interest in rejecting no deal, applying for and agreeing to an extension to Article 50. We may now have more time, but our businesses face more uncertainty. So may I encourage her during the Easter recess to take her own advice and to reflect on the decisions that need to be made and decide to put her deal to the British people so that they can decide whether they still wish to leave, now we know the actual choices that Brexit involves, or remain, so we can finally bring this crisis facing our country to a conclusion.
I say to the right honourable gentleman, as I indicated to the leader of the SNP, neither I nor the government have changed our view on the need for this House, for this Parliament, to deliver on the result of the first referendum. But can I also say to the right honourable gentleman, as I said in my statement, I think it is for all of us across this House to recognise the decisions that now face us. It is for this House to determine whether we are going to deliver Brexit for the British people. We have that opportunity. We can work together to find an agreement that will command a majority of this House, and if we do that in time, we can leave the European Union without holding the European parliamentary elections.
Dame Caroline Spellman.
Mr. Speaker, in my region already there are car factories that are in a forced shutdown because of the Brexit uncertainty. So could I thank the Prime Minister for helping us avoid a no-deal crash-out, and through her the 27 heads of state who supported that decision. Could she elaborate a bit more on her words about creating a forum to establish our future relationship with Europe?
I thank my right honourable friend for her question. I think she's referring to references that I had made previously about the importance, as we're looking at that negotiation on a future relationship, for making sure not only that Parliament has a greater role in that process, but also that we take have wider consultations with civil society, with businesses, with trade unions. And it is the exact format of that forum has not yet been determined. But I think that will be an important element of the next stage of the process to ensure that all voices are being heard and can contribute to the debate on that future relationship.
Sir Vincent Cable.
The Prime Minister has again acknowledged that, notwithstanding her own personal objections, the House could choose to attach a referendum amendment to the withdrawal bill. Bearing in mind the constitutional advice that we shared in cross-party talks a few weeks ago, would she now ask her officials to prepare a timetable completed before the end of October in which such a hypothetical poll could be conducted if the House wills it?
Can I say to the right honourable gentleman, he's aware of the government's position on the issue that he has raised. As I said, there are those in the House who may wish to press their case on this matter when the legislation is going through. But as I would also gently remind him, the House has already rejected that proposal of a second referendum twice.
Sir Patrick McLaughlin.
Will the Prime Minister take the opportunity again to remind the House that when the Leader of the Opposition said that he was only invited to talks at 12:05, he actually refused talks some time ago, and that would have meant that we could have moved this process on a lot quicker. Is it not the case that whatever we say, the simple fact is that the European Commission have said the only deal that's available to us is the one that the Prime Minister is recommending to the House?
Well, my right honourable friend is absolutely right on that last point, and the question of the withdrawal agreement and it not being available to be reopened was made clear, reiterated again by the European Council, by the EU Council, in its decision of yesterday. It is the case that it is some weeks ago that I first offered the Leader of the Opposition the opportunity to talk, and we had an initial meeting. There was then not the same level of follow-up meetings and the same level of interest. What I'm pleased about is I think there is a change in the approach that is being taken. We are both sitting down seriously, looking at these issues in detail and looking at them constructively.
Mr. Nigel Dodds.
Speaker, up until yesterday, the EU was saying very, very clearly that it wouldn't grant an extension unless there was a credible plan, either an election, a referendum, or the prospect of getting a withdrawal agreement through soon. It wouldn't grant an extension, and if it did, there would be stringent conditions. And in fact, neither of those things were held to by the European Union, because when they were faced with the unpalatable choice of a no deal, they backed down. Will the Prime Minister learn the lesson of that? She continues to reiterate what the EU have said about the withdrawal agreement and praise her withdrawal agreement. She and the rest of the front bench voted for changes to the backstop and to the withdrawal agreement, and the Attorney-General, in his devastating critique of it, said that it hadn't changed the fundamentals of what was agreed. So can the Prime Minister please examine where she's going with all of this, learn the lessons, and come back with something that can actually get a majority in this House? And will she also, just on the issue of extensions, bear in mind that the current session of Parliament is due to end, I understand, fairly soon? There is some talk around of extending this session beyond 2 years. And can I say, Mr. Speaker, on that point, that I think many in this House, including in this bench, would regard that as something that is not acceptable.
Well, can I say to the right honourable gentleman, we have consistently sought to change the withdrawal agreement, in particular to change the backstop. He will know full well that we have argued on many occasions for a time limit or a unilateral exit clause or the replacement by alternative arrangements. Before the withdrawal agreement was originally agreed in November, the government pushed consistently for an exit clause from the backstop, but the EU did not agree to it then. After the first meaningful vote, we raised the issue again, and we sought to change the withdrawal agreement and pushed for it to be replaced by alternative arrangements. On the 11th of March, we had an exchange of letters between myself and the Presidents of the Commission and the EU Council in January. On the 11th of March, in Strasbourg, the President of the European Commission and I agreed a package, which means that the EU cannot try to trap the UK in the backstop indefinitely. It's explicitly a breach of the legally binding commitments we have agreed if they do so, and there's a legal commitment that both parties aim to replace the backstop with alternative arrangements by December 2020. But the changes at every stage, we have been working to get changes to the withdrawal agreement. The European Union has been clear now. No. Well, the right honourable gentleman says that they have backed down. Yes, I did put the case yesterday in relation to conditionality that he refers to, in relation to conditionality, and there was discussion around the table about that issue of conditionality, and the aspect that I think everybody around the table focused on is that there is only a single tier of membership of the European Union. There is only, legally, there is only a single tier of membership of the European Union, and they rejected the concept of conditionality on that basis.
Sir Oliver Heald.
The Prime Minister will recall that in the Conservative manifesto there was a commitment to negotiate a comprehensive free trade and customs agreement. Yes. Would she agree with me that her political declaration that has been agreed and her discussions with the Labour Party are being conducted in that spirit? And will she keep going and try to keep to the timetable that avoids the European elections? Because many of us feel it's time to get this done.
I say to my right honourable friend, we are indeed conducting those negotiations in the spirit that he has set out, and I do indeed want to achieve the timetable that he set. I think many of us across this House believe that it is important to do all we can to set in train to ensure that we can leave the European Union before the European parliamentary elections.
Yvette Cooper.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We're in this difficult situation because the government's approach hasn't worked. And simply going round in the same circles or doing the same things isn't going to solve this either. So it would be helpful to understand how far the Prime Minister is actually prepared to reconsider her red lines. Could she tell the House whether she is now willing to consider a common external tariff with the EU, a key part of any customs union, or does she still rule a common external tariff out?
Good question. Good.
Can I say to the right honourable lady, she says, obviously, the House has rejected the government's plan. The House has also rejected the opposition's plan. The House has rejected no deal. The House has rejected revocation. The House has rejected a second referendum. So this House, at some stage, needs to come to an agreement on what it can agree on to take this issue forward. I continue, and when people talk about the customs, yes, I'm aware of the question that the right honourable lady asked. On a customs union, I think there is actually more agreement in relation to a customs union than is often given credit for when different language is used. We've been very clear that we want to obtain the benefits of a customs union, no tariffs, no rules of origin checks, and no quotas, while being able to operate our own independent trade policy. We have been very clear about this. The Labour Party has said they want a say in trade policy. The question is how we ensure that we can provide for this country to be in charge of its trade policy in the future.
John Barron.
The fact remains that we would have left the EU by now on WTO terms if the Prime Minister had not extended deadlines. The investment decisions underpinning our strong economic performance in recent years have been taken in the full knowledge that we could be leaving on WTO terms. Will the Prime Minister therefore show more confidence and commit to this House that if this Parliament does not pass a deal, we will be leaving on WTO terms, terms by which we profitably trade with many countries outside the EU?
I say to my honourable friend that I know, and he has continued to champion the concept of leaving without a deal with the European Union. I believe it is important for this country that we're able to leave in an orderly way. He references WTO terms. Of course, we trade with many countries across the world, not on WTO terms, but on the terms that are determined by the EU trade agreements with those countries. But actually, leaving without a deal is not just about our trade arrangements. It is about other issues. It is about our security as a country as well. There are other matters that a deal will cover. I continue to believe that leaving with a deal in an orderly way is in the best interests of this country, and that's what I'm pursuing.
In the midst of these important and inevitably contentious exchanges, can I ask the House to join me in warmly welcoming in the gallery today former Speaker of the New Zealand Parliament, David Carter, accompanied by Deputy Speaker of the Parliament, the Honourable Anne Tolley MP. It's a great delight to welcome you both. You come from a country that we regard as a great friend, and David, you've been a great friend to us and to me. Welcome. Kate Owe.
Mr. Speaker, does the Prime Minister not take any responsibility for the fact that she, a Conservative Unionist Prime Minister, signed up to this backstop originally without ensuring herself that she would get support in Parliament for it? Now we're in a situation where the only vote that went through this with a big majority was the Brady Amendment. Has she really done her best to ensure that we cannot get the backstop removed? It must be removed before this House will ever support her withdrawal agreement.
Can I say to the Right Honourable Lady, as I indicated earlier, we have at every stage taken this issue of the backstop. We have been arguing with the European Union in relation to this issue. We did take the Brady Amendment as a result of the decision that was taken by this House. We took that issue back into the European Union. The changes that we saw in Strasbourg, the legally binding changes that were obtained in that Strasbourg agreement in Strasbourg between myself and the President of the European Commission, were a direct result of reflecting the views of this House. This government has been clear that not only is there an accelerated timetable to determine alternative arrangements that can replace the backstop, we have actually committed to putting money into the work that will ensure that we have those alternative arrangements to replace the backstop. The Right Honourable Lady knows my view is that the backstop should never be used, it need never be used, and we need to ensure that we have the relationship in the future. That's why the future relationship is the important way of sustainably ensuring that we're meeting all our obligations, including those in relation to a border between Northern Ireland and Ireland.
Steve Baker.
Mr. Speaker, of course the government continues in office thanks to the support of our confidence and supply partners. In the event that the withdrawal agreement is pushed through unamended over the heads of those partners, will the Prime Minister be seeking the confidence of the Labour Party?
I say to my honourable friend, I recognise that in this House, reaching across the divide between the government and opposition front benches to attempt to come to an agreement on a matter is not usual practice. It is, I think, probably virtually unprecedented in the conditions in which we're doing it today. But I believe it is in the national interest for this House to deliver on the result of the referendum, for this House to deliver Brexit for the British people and to do so in an orderly way. I have now voted 3 times to leave the European Union with a deal. I want to see this House, by a majority, voting to leave the European Union with a deal, and that's the work we're carrying on, and that's where we try to find agreement across this House.
Anna Soubry.
Mr. Speaker, I welcome this extension because it provides time for a people's vote, and I agree with the words of the Right Honourable Gentleman for Leeds Central when he says it's the only way out of the crisis and to end the uncertainty. Mr. Speaker, it won't have escaped you that a number of honourable members have heard the words of the Prime Minister when she speaks about compromise, but she still has refused or is unable to tell the House what is her compromise, what are the red lines that she set down, which she now intends to rub out. Prime Minister, please answer those questions. Which of your red lines are you now prepared to rub out?
Say to the Right Honourable Lady that the whole point of sitting down and negotiating and trying to come to an agreement is that both sides are exploring where that point of agreement may be. Those are the discussions we're having. We're entering into them seriously. And we're entering... Oh, rub out. I suggest that the Right Honourable Lady looks at the moves that the government has already made in a number of areas that have been requested by members across this House.
Dr. Andrew Murison.
The government, Leo Varadkar, Michel Barnier and Angela Merkel have all said that there will be no hard border, even in the event of no deal. So can we now put the idea of a Northern Ireland forever backstop out of its misery and work on mitigating an upfront customs union if a customs union is the price of Labour support for getting something approximating Brexit over the line?
Can I just say to my honourable friend that in fact, and I have obviously talked with a number of those that he has quoted in relation to this issue of a border, that the European Union has been very clear that the rules of the European Union must be applied at the border in the event that there was no deal. That is absolutely clear from the European Union, and some of the other comments have been taken out of context in the interpretation that has been given to them. On this issue of a customs union, I come back to the position I set out earlier. We want to see the benefits of a customs union. In fact, that is in the political declaration, of no tariffs, no quotas, and no rules of origin checks. We also want to see, and was reflected in the political declaration, an independent trade policy. The Labour Party has a position of the benefits of a customs union with a say in trade policy. We are very clear that the benefits of a customs union can be obtained while ensuring that we have the freedom to make those trade deals around the rest of the world that we want to do as an independent country.
Ben Bradshaw.
Can I also thank the Prime Minister on behalf of my constituents in Exeter for ensuring that this country does not crash out of the European Union without a deal tomorrow, in the national interest, and I thank her for that. But does she also not recognise in the national interest that the only way out of this gridlock is to now give this decision back to the people, give them a confirmatory vote on her Brexit deal?
I have to say to the Right Honourable Gentleman, I think the way out of this gridlock is for this House to identify the deal that it can agree, that it can take forward, that it can get to, that can command a majority of this House, because I think it is for this House to deliver on the result of the referendum that took place in 2016.
Sarah Newton.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Clearly the Prime Minister has won the respect of the European Union leaders, and that's really important that we have good relations with our near neighbours and allies. It's essential for our prosperity and our security. So would I urge the Prime Minister to ignore the bullies on our backbenches and stick to your guns and deliver that Brexit, the Brexit that was in our manifesto so well described by the Leader of the House.
Well, can I thank my honourable friend for her intervention, and can I say that we are aiming to deliver what I believe people in this country voted for. which is that Brexit that does protect jobs and livelihoods, does protect our security, does protect our union, but also ensures that we bring an end to free movement, that we're no longer under the jurisdiction of the European Court of Justice, that we're no longer sending vast sums of money to the European Union every year. That is what we are aiming to deliver, and that is what I want to see. A deal that enables us to do that is what I want to see gaining a majority in this House.
Ms Saville-Roberts.
And I am grateful for advance sight of the statement. 27 leaders decided the UK's fate last night, while the Prime Minister waited for their decision outside. 7 of those leaders represent countries whose populations are smaller than that of Wales. Yet we are told here in Westminster that Wales is too small, too poor to have a seat at the table. Does the Prime Minister agree that Wales would be best served in a union that treats its members as equals, rather than staying in this self-harming union of inequality?
I say to the Honourable Lady that, as she knows very well, we work with the devolved administrations across the United Kingdom in taking forward the issues that are of particular concern to the various parts of the United Kingdom in determining what is the right way forward. We entered the European Union as one United Kingdom, and we will leave the European Union as one United Kingdom.
Peter Bottomley.
Following the referendum in 2016 and the 2 major parties' policies in 2017, we have a collective responsibility to deliver. The rational, responsible, practical way forward is to take the withdrawal agreement with a majority through this House and then move on with the best possible customs arrangements that will satisfy most people, including, I believe, the majority of the people in Northern Ireland.
Well, can I say to my honourable friend, he is absolutely right. I believe it is important for us to deliver on the vote of the referendum, but as he's reminded the House, of course, the 2 main parties in this chamber both campaigned in the last general election on manifestos precisely to deliver that Brexit, and that's what we should be looking to do.
Liz Kendall.
Prime Minister, we need to use this extension for a purpose. One more heave isn't good enough, and it won't work. Right. Neither will trying to con people that we can have all the benefits of a customs union and still have a completely independent trade policy. So can I ask her once again, does she acknowledge, even if it's not what she wants, putting her withdrawal agreement to the public is the way to break this Brexit deadlock and get the resolution our country desperately needs?
I genuinely believe that the way to break the Brexit deadlock is for this House to be able to agree on a deal that it will deliver on the vote of the British people.
Boone.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. At Prime Minister's questions on the 20th of March, when I asked the Prime Minister why she was seeking to extend Article 50, having promised on 108 times not to do so, she said, as Prime Minister, I could not consider a delay further beyond the 30th of June. We now, sir, have an extension up to the 31st of October. Prime Minister, how are you going to honour that commitment you gave to the House on the 20th of March?
Can I say to my honourable friend, this House and I can honour that commitment by voting for a deal that enables us to leave before the 30th of June.
Pat McFadden.
The Prime Minister has now applied for and been granted 2 extensions to the Article 50 period, and she did this to avoid the consequences of a no-deal Brexit, consequences which were laid out by the Cabinet Secretary 2 weeks ago. Rising food prices, shortages of food, stockpiling medicine, huge damage to manufacturing and the weakening of our national security. Yet for 2 years, she talked up this outcome, saying no deal is better than a bad deal. This irresponsible rhetoric has helped to normalise these consequences in the minds of the public. Does she regret talking up no deal and legitimising an outcome which she knows is bad for the country, and by the acceptance of these extensions, she is desperate to avoid?
I stand by what I have consistently said in relation to no deal better than a bad deal, but we have a good deal. I say to the right honourable gentleman, I have voted on 3 occasions in this House for us to leave the European Union with a deal. And I think it's all members of this House who wish to deliver on leaving the European Union need to think about how we can come together and find a majority that enables us to do just that. I voted to leave with a deal. I hope the right honourable gentleman will want to vote to leave with a deal in the future too.
Julia Lopez.
Since the first defeat of the deeply flawed withdrawal agreement, the government seems to have focused on how to make all other options worse rather than how to make the agreement better. Given that this narrow strategy continues to fail and cross-party talks may not bear fruit, what assurances and outline did the Prime Minister give our EU friends on her Plan B, such that this latest extension becomes one with a purpose?
My honourable friend is absolutely right, and this was a point that was made earlier about the expression that the European Union had given that they would want a purpose for any extension. I was clear with them about the approach that we are taking, the talks that we are having with the opposition, but also, as I made clear in my statement last week, that if we are not able to come to an agreement with the opposition such that there would be a proposal that would meet a majority across this House, we would move into a means of ensuring that this House was able to vote on options and come to a decision as to what its preferred option, as to what was able to get a majority across this House. And the extension is there to enable us to put that process into place.
Caroline Lucas.
Speaker, a 6-month delay is just 74 sitting days. To waste it on a Tory leadership contest would be an unforgivable act of self-indulgence, an issue that she might, for once, agree with me about. But she's wasted the last 2 years. Will she undertake not to waste 1 day further by supporting the immediate establishment of a House Business Committee so that we might just have a chance of have a process that is in the interests of the country rather than in the interests of the Tory party, with more votes being pulled at the last minute and more gameplay?
Can I say to the honourable lady, no, I think that the arrangements that we have in relation to, obviously arrangements in relation to business of this House have been changing in recent days through decisions that have been taken by this House, but I do not believe that the establishment of a House Business Committee is the right way forward.
Mark Francois.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister's first extension was based on the fact that we would ratify the withdrawal agreement, and in what was effectively MB3, we turned it down again. And now she's been given another extension longer than she asked for, yet again on the basis that we will somehow ratify the withdrawal agreement. Perseverance is a virtue, but sheer obstinacy is not. So, Prime Minister...
Hear, hear.
If, as I suspect, the Leader of the Opposition strings you along in these talks and then finds a pretext to collapse them and then throws in a confidence motion, what will you do then?
I would continue to argue for the Conservative Party remaining in government, a party that has led to a situation in this country where we see record levels of employment, 32 million people with tax cuts, a modern industrial strategy, 1.9 million more children in good and outstanding schools. We're delivering for people, and that's why this party should remain in government.
Stephen Doughty.
Extension. I welcome the ruling out of a catastrophic no deal, and I welcome the fact that there are talks going on between our two parties, because I think it is important that we try and find consensus and attempt to break the deadlock. But can I warn the Prime Minister that attempting to decouple the issue of a deal from the issue of whether that goes back to the people for their confirmation will not be acceptable to many, many people on these benches, and indeed an increasing number on her own? And will she recognise that the only way to break the deadlock will be a confirmatory vote and putting this issue back to the people?
Well, the honourable gentleman will have heard the answers I gave earlier in response to similar questions about this question of a second referendum. I do genuinely believe we gave a vote to the British people in 2016. I do genuinely believe we should be delivering on that. I think actually there is a view across this House that we should be delivering on Brexit. The question is finding an agreement across this House that enables us to do that, to get the legislation through and leave the EU.
Maggie through.
Can my right friend confirm that if we're to come together across this House and support a deal in a timely fashion after Easter, there would be every reason that we would not need to hold the European elections?
The honourable friend is right. Obviously, it's a very tight timetable, but if we were able to have an agreement that commanded a majority across this House, and obviously we have to get the legislation through, but I believe my ambition and aim would still be to be able to do that such that we do not need to hold the European parliamentary elections.
Joanna Cherry.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Whenever the Prime Minister is asked about a second referendum, she's keen to remind us that that's been defeated twice in this House. But of course her withdrawal agreement has been defeated 3 times in this House. And on the second outing for a second referendum in this House, it got 280 votes, which is considerably better than her withdrawal agreement got on its second outing in this House. And in fact, if support for a second referendum grew at the same rate as support for her withdrawal agreement, it would win outright if it got a third vote. So, in the number of options that she intends to put to this House, if she can't get an agreement with Her Majesty's opposition, in recognition of that democratic fact, will she include a second referendum?
The honourable lady that she is again also actually talking about process here in relation to a second referendum. What this House needs to agree is the basis on which we can leave the European Union. And that is it is the substance of that is the nature of the discussions that we are having with the opposition.
Damien Green.
Many in this place, but more importantly, many exporting businesses and farmers will welcome the fact that they are no longer facing tariffs that would threaten their survival, which would have happened if we crashed out with no deal tomorrow night. So, to that extent, the Council conclusions are very welcome. But can my right honourable friend the Prime Minister agree with me that, contrary to many of the voices from opposition benches, a second referendum wouldn't be the end of the process, it would be the start of the process, and in the current climate it would be much more likely to lead to greater division in this country rather than the healing that we desperately need?
Can I say to my right honourable friend, I think he is absolutely right. I am concerned that a second referendum would increase division in our society, increase division across this country, just at the time when we do need to be bringing people together. We can bring people together by agreeing the way in which we can leave the European Union, getting on with it and delivering for people on their vote.
Peter Kyle.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Following on from the right honourable member for Ashford's question, it seems that our body politic is increasingly fearful of the electorate. We are held hostage to the 2016 referendum and other public ballots. And isn't it true that the tone and conduct of us as politicians and her as a leader of our country is increasingly important, and as important as the policies themselves? Is now not the time that we sit back and we reflect and we start to investigate how we can use public ballots to bring people together as a country, not run away scared of public ballots, and how we can understand how we can actually lead through elections with rigour and focus on fact rather than division itself?
I recognise the passion and seriousness with which the honourable gentleman has campaigned and championed the concept of second referendum in this House and elsewhere. I simply say to him, nobody is running scared of the electorate. We gave the electorate the opportunity to determine the fate of this country in relation to its membership of the European Union, and they made a decision on that. They made a decision that we should leave the European Union. So I think that, in fact, there would be many people, if we were to go back to the people in a second referendum, there would be many people who would fear that that was actually a sign of bad faith in relation to their politicians, and I think could damage our democracy.
Richard Harrington.
Speaker. I'd like to thank my right honourable friend, the Prime Minister, for all of her efforts that have taken place to remove the nonsense of no deal from this agenda. In her statement, she mentioned that if the talks fall, which I certainly hope is not the case, that she'll put to the House a series of votes to determine which course to pursue. Could she confirm to me that there will be a voting system of preference which allows the House to finally decide on one solution to this problem?
What I have said and what is the intention of the government is that if the talks with the opposition fail to find a point of agreement between us that we believe will get a majority across this House, we would work with the opposition to identify options and votes that will be put to this House to find a way of determining a single result. There are a number of ways in which it is possible to do that. I think what would be important would be ensuring that whatever system was chosen, were we in that position, whatever voting system was chosen, was genuinely going to come to a proper reflection of the views of this House.
Stephen Kinnock.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Prime Minister knows that full membership of the single market is the only way we can guarantee workers' rights, guarantee the integrity of the union, do something for the services sector, which is 80% of the economy. A standalone customs union simply doesn't cut it. So in these options that will be presented to us if the talks don't work, can she guarantee that full membership of the single market through the European Economic Area will be an option that will be on offer amongst those options?
Can I say to the honourable gentleman that I don't recognise the picture that he has painted in relation to these matters. It is not the case that full membership of the single market is the only way to achieve the benefits that he has referred to. It's particularly important as we leave the European Union that we have a care for our services sector. He's right, given the significant extent to which that plays a role in our economy, but actually that flexibility and maintaining and recognising the importance of the City of London, particularly in financial services, and the risk that is borne here in the United Kingdom leads us to want to see that greater flexibility in relation to services. And on workers' rights, can I say to him, it is not the case that the only way to ensure that we maintain and enhance workers' rights in the United Kingdom is through full membership of the single market. This is a government that is enhancing workers' rights. It's doing that because we believe that's what's right here in the United Kingdom.
Sir Nicholas Soames.
Speaker, will my right honourable friend agree with me that there are actually many other very important issues facing the European Union, including, for the moment, the United Kingdom, particularly in respect of the European Union's crucial relationship with China? And will she confirm that, given the extension granted by our European partners, that she will direct Britain's negotiators to use this extra valuable time creatively in relation to trade with China, which inevitably, when we have left the European Union, will be much harder to negotiate?
Well, can I say to my right honourable friend, he is absolutely right, of course, that there are a number of other issues facing the European Union, including its relationship with China. He will be aware of the benefits that we already have as a United Kingdom from investment from China and the interaction of trade that we have with China, and we will, of course, want to enhance that for the future. As a member of the European Union, during this extension, we will continue to participate and continue to operate with that duty of sincere cooperation and fulfil all our rights and obligations.
Chukramuna.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Prime Minister has wasted most of the last 2 years negotiating Brexit with her own divided party, when what she actually needs to do is rub out her red lines to bring this House and our country together. The problem is she always puts her party before country. So will she now commit to stopping flogging her dead horse of a deal, face down the hardliners in her own party, and give serious consideration to a people's vote, which her own Chancellor has said is a perfectly credible proposition?
For the honourable gentleman to the answer I gave earlier.
George Freeman.
Would my right honourable friend agree with me as a former business minister that the businesses of this country, on whom we all rely, deserve better than this ongoing crisis and chaos, and need the certainty that could be delivered if every member of this House respected the referendum and in their constituency a vote to leave and voted for it? And could she tell me what to tell voters on the doorsteps on May the 2nd when my hard-working local councillors risk
being thrown out after 4 years of really good work on our behalf for something they are not responsible for.
Well, my honourable friend is absolutely right about the importance of us delivering, finding a way through in this House to deliver on Brexit and to ensure that we do that in an orderly way. And I would say to my honourable friend that on those doorsteps, I think what he should be saying to to voters is, first of all, that this is a government which has been working to deliver Brexit and which continues to work to deliver Brexit. But when it comes to the local council elections, people should, I'm sure, recognise that if they actually want good local services and they want lower council tax, then there is only one way to vote, and that is vote Conservative.
In Smith.
Mr. Speaker, may I commend the Prime Minister for the flexibility that she's shown in recent days in rejecting no deal and requesting the extension to Article 50 that she'd previously rejected. And may I ask that she shows a similar spirit of compromise in accepting that one way in which she can get her deal through this Parliament is if she attaches to it a people's vote.
Can I refer the honourable gentleman to the answer I gave earlier?
Mr. Alistair Burt.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I also support the Prime Minister's efforts at continuing to seek a resolution to the problem that she has, share her concerns about being where we are, but also express concern that the next time we seek an extension, it may not be there. In order to avoid the dramatic consequences of that, will she, in addition to pursuing the withdrawal agreement, as she rightly should, be as flexible as possible in relation to the alternatives? And if she is to get a true reflection of the House's view, allow free votes on those alternatives to ensure that we can get an agreement over the line, leave the EU and have the future relationship with the EU that we want?
Well, can I say to my right honourable friend, I think this is a first opportunity I have to be able to thank him for all the work that he has done as a minister over the years. And can I also say to him that we will, of course, we are working, as I said, to see if we can find that point of agreement with the opposition that would command a majority across this House. If we're not able to do that, we will want to agree the way in which we can take votes forward such that we do identify an opinion across this House which will command a majority and enable us to do, as my right honourable friend has said, which is to leave the European Union, to do that in an orderly way, to do that in a way that is good for the UK.
Sammy Wilson.
In these negotiations, the EU demanded £39 billion and got it, an unnecessary Irish backstop and got it, a withdrawal agreement which will tie our hands in future negotiations and got it, and extensions which were against the commitments given by the Prime Minister and got it. Can she give us any example of any demand by the EU which she actually resisted?
Well,